this year, and the reason I chose this image is because it's someone just getting ready to go on a race that's probably going to be long and hard. That's what I'm assuming. Just to introduce myself, I've worked in the intranet digital workplace space for 16 years with a lot of global organizations. I've conducted the annual research every year since 2006. 3 years ago, just to sort of be a little bit more precise, I redefined it as digital workplace. I'm among the few people in the world who began the digital workplace concept in the last few years. And I was teased a lot by a lot of my virtual colleagues saying it's just another name for an intranet. And now people are beginning to understand that it really is a different concept, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I'm American and French. I was born in France 2 years ago, and when you take nationality in France, I was astonished. I got a birth certificate in France. It did keep my original birth date, unfortunately. I would have liked it to start over again, but it didn't do that. But you actually get a certificat de naissance when you are naturalized in France. So I have mine framed. So anyway. So I live in the south of France. I have moved away from the Côte d'Azur and into the Gard. Now I live in a village that's not far from Avignon. So it's a sort of a different place to live. This is a view that I see from my car in the spring and in the autumn. The thing about the Gard is you have incredible skies, incredible skies every end of day. And you also have a contrast. The weather changes a lot. You have the Mistral wind, and you have the weather that changes a lot. You've got sunshine, dark clouds, and it's quite an exciting place to live, totally different from the Côte d'Azur. I'm sure French people here in the room can know what that difference is. Before I actually get into the nitty-gritty of what I want to talk to you about, I want to thank the advisory board who helped me this year define the survey and help me work on the scorecard concept that I'm going to show you. We have several members of the advisory board here in the room. Bjorn, who I don't see him now, was on the advisory board. Céline, who is here, and who else? John, where are you, John? And I think those are the only people. Martin Riska, 4. Is that all? I think I've gotten everyone who's actually physically in the room. And these people, for me, are partners in everything that I've done. Each year, I have an advisory board. This was the first year that I extended it away from practitioners. I've always been very focused on practitioners. There are enough consultants doing things, and consultants talking to other consultants tend to get a little conceptual and away from reality. But I invited thought leaders in areas. These people didn't come from the intranet background that I have. And the ideas that they brought, their contributions to where the survey should be going were very valuable for me. So I want to thank them publicly. This is the way that I'm defining the digital workplace. It's a concept that is much larger than just the technology. And the way it's been defined now, and we worked over this with the advisory board, different renditions and different vocabulary and disagreements and agreements, and it was a process that took a while. And I've ended up with the idea that the digital workplace is actually something that it lives at the intersection of people, first of all, of organizations, the processes, the structures, and so on of organizations, and tools. And I deliberately put tools as the third word. The scorecard that we have defined, well, we've got this in the middle, has 3, I would say, perspectives. One perspective is capabilities. What capabilities does the digital workplace give to people as individuals in an organization? What capabilities does it give to business and to the enterprise as a cross-enterprise body? So that's one angle of analysis. The second angle of analysis is enablers. And in particular, we defined not all processes in the organization, but the new processes in the organization, such as crowdsourcing, such as co-creation, such as enterprise Q&A, these new processes and ways of working that are entering organizations. Structure was defined as new structural elements, such as communities and social networks that are complementary to the hierarchical structures. They don't replace it, in my opinion. I know that Luis and I have some interesting discussion about that, but for me, the hierarchy is there, and needs to be there. And these entities, which are actually gaining more and more power, so maybe someday the hierarchy will go down. But in the meantime, they are very complementary to that. A third aspect of enabler is reach. And reach, I defined as reaching all of the workforce. So there's a notion of mobile solutions, there's a notion of the floor field workforce, how do they access the digital workplace? There's the notion of BYOD, bring your own device, bring your own PC, bring your own application. Those are things that went into reach. And then something that I think was new for quite a lot of people was this idea that of mindset, in that, and I thought a long time, and we talked a lot about this choice of word, because we talked about, is it really leadership that has components? Is it culture that has components? And I finally decided it's mindset, the set of the mind in the organization that I defined as the ways of thinking and acting, the values and the ways, hang on one second. Let me just get this correct. Oh, I didn't put it there. But the idea is it's the shared values and behaviors that determine how an organization and people act. That's how we define mindset. And we put three components in it: leadership, culture, and asset, meaning strategic asset. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't have much time today, but these slides will be made available if you would like to have them. You don't need to photocopy. You don't need to snapshot them. You can have a copy. And I have included here the points that come from the survey questions and how they were classified under, these are the capabilities, under individual, business, enterprise, the points included under enablers, and the points included under mindset. And you can look at that in more detail. The survey itself, it was completed this year by 314 organizations from around the world. We had organizations ranging from under 1,000 employees, that was maybe 11, 10, 15%. I have a chart at the back that shows you that. And we had maybe same percentage of organizations with over 100,000 employees. And so there's a real range of industries, of size of organization in the survey this year. So this is our starting point for what I want to show you next. So this is the model, if you want to call it that, a conceptual model for the digital workplace, which I then transformed into a maturity scale. Traditional, sort of, you start with the ad hoc unmanaged and beginning and organizational visible, sustainable, embedded, proactive, 5 levels that aren't revolutionary at all. I mean, that's the way maturity models tend to use terms like that. And then placing capabilities, enablers, and mindset with the 9 different dimensions. And all the questions online that the people answered had different data points. There were about 100 questions. The survey takes at least an hour to do. And if you do it as a group of people, like I know Céline did at Sanofi, it takes longer than an hour. Air Liquide did it with 2 people from IT, 2 people from communication in the same room. I think it took them 3 hours because it triggered so much discussion that to come to an agreement as to which answer they were going to tick was actually an enriching process itself, just having that discussion. But the 100 questions or so give about 300, 400 data points that get mapped to these different dimensions, which enables us to produce a scorecard. It's the first time, to my knowledge, that this has been done in the digital workplace sphere. What you see here, these are the majority of organizations that are at what I call the beginning level of a digital workplace. This is not an internet maturity thing. This is a digital workplace as the holistic concept with the different dimensions I showed you on the scorecard. It's normal for me that the vast majority of organizations be at a beginning level, because as a concept, it is relatively new, and the way organizations are going now, bringing things together, making things more unified for users, is also relatively new. It's no longer a question of we've got the internet over here with managed information, we've got our document sharing over here, we have business apps over here. These things, organizations, the ones I know, are trying to bring these things together, not technically integrated, but bring them together in a coherent way where each one has its own meaning and makes it easier for people to know where to go to find things. The blue dots that you see up there are the early adopters, and they were defined very simply as the top 20% of scores in the survey. I had to take an arbitrary percentage because I mapped them on an Excel sheet, and it just went like this. Some very top ones, and it was like this smooth. Things weren't bunched together. I mean, the companies are just all over the place right now. It just sort of went down like that. So I decided 20%, 80% was a reasonable division to make. So we have, in the majority, you can see bottom left, there are 247 organizations. Early adopters, there's 67. And so you'll see on the different things I show you that they are compared. Because the scorecard was fairly structured now, it had labeled me to do something I'd always wanted to do and never had the ability myself to do through the data or my technical tools. And that is, I looked at the industries, because I've asked people for the last 8 years, what industry are you in? But I sort of looked at it out of interest, but I never really did anything with that information. And so now I can see that the professional services industry, where is Ernst & Young? Right, sorry, I didn't see there. Professional services industry, we have 11% of the organizations are at level 5 in the digital workplace. They got the highest scores out of all the industries. So here you see level 5, 4, 3, and 2. TMT was next, financial services afterwards. So this red line here shows simply the ones that are at levels 4 and level 5 and level 4. And then the report contains a scorecard for each industry. It contains a scorecard for the leaders in each industry. And each participant will get by email, later this month, their own individual scorecard based on the answers that they give. So they'll be able to look and see, how do I compare to my industry, and so on. And it was a couple people on the advisory board who pushed me to take it to the point of giving out a score so people began to have a framework in which they could think about the digital workplace. And it'll be real interesting for me to see how this work is received in general by practitioners, by other consultants, and see if this framework that we've defined is workable for everybody. The next few months are going to be really interesting. This is just an overall snapshot of the main topics, the main chapters in the report this year. So we have the first the introduction just explains the scorecard. But the customer focus one I deliberately put first because I believe the digital workplace is there to serve the customer, the external customer of your organization. Not directly, but the subtitle I use for that is serving the workforce that serves the customers. And I think that's a fundamental thing for the digital workplace. Working out loud is a chapter. Organizational design is a chapter. Humanizing the enterprise. Smart and agile organization. The mindset impact, talking about leadership and culture, and then the new workplace where things are getting really turned around in a different way. And I've chosen just a few highlights from each one to show you today. One thing I found really, really interesting is every year for like the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I've said, what are your top strategic drivers for the digital workplace? Offer the same list with a little tweaking each time based on people's reactions. Increasing organizational intelligence and gaining efficiency and cost savings are, for almost everyone, they're at the top. I asked them to choose 3 out of 5. Those are almost always at the top. And I saw this year that for the early adopters, it was the organizational intelligence that was clearly at the top. And for the majority, it was clearly gaining efficiency and cost savings. I found that an interesting, I don't know exactly how to interpret that, but I found that interesting. Customer focus. There's a big difference between what the early adopters are doing in their digital workplace to serve customers, serve the workforce that's serving customers, and the others. You see that almost half say that operational managers have active use of the digital workplace in their jobs compared to 10% of the majority. Same thing for the integration of customer service, customer delivery tools that are part of the digital workplace. There's a big difference. The early adopters are really using the digital workplace to serve the customer-serving workforce. I had 4 business scenarios. I'm going to share one with you. It was a very broad question. It was, how easy is it for the workforce in your organization who serves customers to be able to work in real time, get the information they need, collaborate with their customers when they are, not in the premises, but with the customer or in front of the customer. And out of the 314 organizations, 9 said it's very easy. And 97 said it's relatively easy. Those were the top 2 levels of a 5-level scale. 9 said it was very easy. I found that, well, I won't say depressing, but I found And I wasn't so surprised about it, but I found it interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see how that develops. Here's the scorecard. Without going into detail and looking at it, just glancing at it generally, you see this is where the ones who say relatively easy fall, the 97. Here's where the 9 very easy fall. And notice that they have reach very high. So in other words, they are better able to reach their workforce. They have business high. They have enterprise. Enterprise was defined as cross-functional things like finding people from anywhere in the organization, even when you don't know them, finding information from anywhere in the organization. So those are very strong aspects of digital workplaces where, based on self-assessment, these are all self-assessment people giving their opinion about their own case, they say it's very easy for our customer-facing workforce to be online and be on real time and have accurate information for customers. In the chapter on humanizing the enterprise, I put several different notions. One was empowering people to express themselves and to do things that they have not previously been able to do from a digital viewpoint, and mobile services. This is a chart that shows you the data. The bottom pale gray line is from 2008, survey that came out in 2008. This is the survey, this survey this year, data from the end of 2013. Now this, I find, things have not advanced quite that much. The questions were, are people able to share information and knowledge by using tools like blogs and wikis and whatever without going through an official publisher? In other words, can people do it directly themselves? User-generated content, can they do that easily? Enterprise-wide or in some parts of the organization? And here we have 64% of the companies today say yes. 64% of the companies say yes, that can be done. In 2008, it was only 37%. So we see these things have increased. The reason I circle this is that was described as, can people, through commenting or liking or responding or asking questions on a blog, can they react to things that are published in the digital workplace? And I can't want to say 28. In 2008, only 20% said yes. So that's more than doubled. But it still is low, isn't it? That's half of the organizations. People can't do that yet. So I find that interesting. When you look at the charts in the report on early adopters, in the majority, of course, early adopters are much more frequent to enable people to do that than the majority are. The question about mobile, you probably can't read these very well, but the question is, has mobile been considered high priority with significant investment? Mobile for the workforce, not for customers. Over here we have the last 3 years. So this is 2014, previous year. So up here, high priority, significant investment already made. That hasn't changed much over 3 years. This is data from the end of 2013. This has sort of moved around a bit, considered important. But over here, when you look at the early adopters, you've got a lot of early adopters that are into mobile services. This chart shows what I believe will happen in the next 12 months. I think that mobile is ready now, organizations are ready now to really get serious about it. And that's because of the proportion of people who said, the survey took place in September, October. And so sorry about that. I asked them, how many are piloting or planning? Well, first of all, are they implemented already? Are you planning by the end of 2013? What about the end of 2014? So I got an idea of what that perspective was 12 months out. And these top services, the box here, it's more for business operational people. Based on those figures, about 30% of organizations will have mobile services for their workforce that fit these use cases. And the bottom is more general services for all the employees in the organization. That's going to be probably 40%. We will see if that's what happens. But based on the answers I got, that's what's predicted. New organizational design. This is, when Olivier was talking from L'Oréal, I think there have been so many points today where people, real companies with real stories, have said things that make me think about different slides that I had prepared. This was one of them. This is what makes up part of your digital workplace. And so this is managed spaces. This is team spaces. This is community spaces. Early adopters, 80% of them have community spaces enterprise-wide in the organization. For me, that's a fundamental new thing in how the organization is functioning, compared to, 23% in the majority. That figure is very striking. Here's a perspective over 6 years on enterprise social networks, which I find very interesting. The data that we have here starts I didn't ask the question that year, so the data goes up. These are percentages. And so now the most recent percentage is about, 43% of the organizations have enterprise social networking in place, either enterprise-wide or in some parts of the organization. So it's not a high number. It's fewer than half the organizations. It corresponds with the reality I see as a consultant, sort of on the ground, but I think that there's a lot of room for growth. I mean, and you can see the way it's going. I mean, it's clearly increasing. There was a big jump there. I find that real interesting. And smaller jump at that point. I think, am I running out of time, Bjorn? No, I'm okay. Mindset impact. I noticed, and this is the first time again, I noticed a lot of new things this year because of the fact that I asked questions about the attitude of top management, the attitude of HR, IT, communication, in a digital workplace, organizational context. I asked things like, is HR a driving force in social collaboration? You can imagine that the answer was not very high there. Are they active and regular users of social collaboration? Are they occasional users? I asked questions of this sort in the survey, which I had not really addressed in the past, and that enabled me to correlate those things with capabilities that organizations and people and business had, and to see what the differences are beyond technology in terms of early adopters in the majority. And it was fascinating for me to see, this goes on, Luis will like this one. I saw that the top management and operational management were much more involved in decision-making in the digital workplace than the intermediate levels of management. And I found that really interesting, the top and the operational. And I think, I know cases where the top is on board, but it doesn't go down below that. I know cases where operational people are doing experiments and it doesn't bubble up. And I think when you've got the top and I don't want to say the bottom, but you understand what I mean. I would say the head office and the front lines. When you have them both involved in it, it's fantastic. And the early adopters clearly have that situation. The early adopters also are much more numerous to say that we have an enterprise transformation program and the digital workplace is part of it. Or we have a specific enterprise-wide program dedicated to the digital workplace. That means it's gone up to the top level of the organization. It's become something official in the organization. And what's encouraging about this is that the majority who are not high there are quite high. 40% are working on alignment now. So we'll sort of see what that's like 12 months from now. This has caused a lot of conversation. I showed this slide in November in the Internet Social Network Conference in Paris, and I showed it in Washington, D.C. at Knowledge Management World. And this is a question I took inspiration from, what was her name? Sandy Carter, VP of Social Business. She presented at Enterprise 2.0 Summit last year. I was very impressed by this analysis tool. She had cultural analysis tool, and I took from it the certain ones and adjusted it to suit what I wanted to do, how you determine what your culture is like. And these are opposed things, like you have team-oriented or individually competitive. Freedom to experiment, or are rules mandatory? Initiatives, entrepreneurship is encouraged. You're told to follow instructions. Information systems are mostly open, they're mostly closed. So I took those and I asked participants to rate them on a scale of from 1 to 5. And I took 4 and 5 together and 1 and 2 together because I wanted to get a general feeling. And surprise, surprise, the early adopters are more team-oriented, there's more freedom, people are encouraged to take initiatives. The attitude is we learn from mistakes. Not totally. I mean, if we take freedom to experiment, they do have a point over here. It's like, 20% there. They don't add up to 100% because of my combining 4 and 5 together, the highest levels, and 1 and 2 together. But the pattern that's produced there, if you look over here, the rules, the follow instructions, rules are mandatory. I mean, the shape of the radar charts is quite different. the toughest challenges, one thing that Bjorn asked me to do was to talk about what are the challenges to be overcome. And I won't go through them all now, but the scale that I used here is the first thing is we've already dealt successfully with this. It's a manageable challenge but requires special effort. It's a serious challenge, holds us back. It's not relevant for us. You see, the ROI challenge, by 20% of the early adopters say we've dealt with that. And the thing that struck me, it took me a while to see it on this chart, but the highest points of manageable challenge requires special effort on focus on the tool. We don't want to rethink what we're doing, stakeholder politics, too much consensus decision making. Those things considered manageable require special effort, where the highest for serious challenge holds us back for the majority. I found that very interesting. It shows that the early adopters have made a step in a direction that the majority haven't yet made. This chart is, again, very revealing because here there's practically no difference between the early adopters and the majority. The question was, what concerns impact the development of your digital workplace, information security, regulatory issues, accessing the digital workplace from outside the corporate walls, mobile devices. And if you look at the numbers, we're practically in the same numbers. These are things that are being faced by all organizations, early adopters or not. Change drivers. They're different for early adopters and the majority, but there's a general agreement about behavior being a very strong one. Behavior of colleagues, behavior of senior leaders, operational manager behavior, and this particular one increased 17% points in the last 12 months. Operational manager behavior was lower on the list 12 months ago, which is a sign to me that it's getting down to the people who are, I would say, doing the real work in an organization. Also, I was surprised to see that internal communication campaigns is higher than it was last year, 14 percentage points. So I feel like there's an effort on part of the enterprise to communicate about it, and at the same time, there's a change happening at the operational level. This is just my slide that I put in. I felt obliged to do it, Bjorn, because she said to me, what are the key success factors? And I think we've had so many advice and advice that the different case studies they have given us that I don't want to repeat that. As a consultant, I arrive in an organization, I try to help them through a workshop process, derive at what their definition of the digital workplace is, what are their goals, what action plan do they need to get there, who should be involved, which they do, and so on. And I think that the key things, because you internally in your organizations probably do something very similar, and you need to get all the key players in the room at the same time, at least one point in time. You need to get a vision, strategic principles, or something like it should be accessible to all the workforce. It should be people-centric, things that we say easily, but then you have to say, okay, what does that mean? What are the implications of that? And you have to do that stuff before you start actually talking about the digital workplace, because then you can come back to those principles and say, look, we said this is a principle, we said these are the implications, so therefore we need to be able to do this. And it's a way of, I would say, accelerating decision-making. I think it's very interesting to build persona profiles of typical people in the organization and find out how they work, not what they do with the digital workplace, but how they work in general. And recent client engagements I've had where we've done that, we've discovered processes that don't work in the organization because people describe how they work and what their frustrations are. And in one steering committee group, people said, but that's not our problem, that's a process problem. And my reaction was justement, the digital workplace is there to help with that, to build new processes, get them working better, and so on. And you will definitely find them if you get down to the reality, the real people doing the real work in the organization. And I advise you, as we've said several times, not to fall into the ROI game, not yet, that examples, anecdotes from your organization or external organizations are much more powerful. And I think as a team, as a digital workplace team, you need to work out loud. It's not enough to say you're helping your organization learn how to work out loud. You, as a project team, need to be making the vast majority of what you do available to everyone in the organization. And I get pushback on that with all my clients. Honestly, I don't have a single client who's done that yet. They'll put up a blog with a little bit of update on it, but they won't really work out loud. And I think it's an important thing to do. I mean, they would save so much time, and they would pick up on reactions so much faster if they did that. So that's one of my personal missions over the next few months, is to try to get my clients to work out loud as they evolve their digital workplaces. So that's it. That's what I have to say. And open to your direct questions first.
Thank you. Are there any questions? So it's getting late and the air's not.
I'm around all day
so
tomorrow. If you have questions, I'm available.
Still, I think also at this point, one thing we still have to work out again. So for you, the digital workplace is what again?
For me, the digital workplace is all of the digital platforms that people in an organization use to do their work in the context of the organization, the attitude, and so on. I would extend that definition to external platforms as well, although I have not yet included external in the research I do. But it's a workplace that's digital, and it's more than tools. It's also a new way of working.
And in terms of the evolution throughout the last years, in terms of the importance or the strategic or the importance of the digital workplace in the management has been there. Could you find out some changes in this, that it's now getting more realized, more perceived,
Yes,
the
yes,
higher
it is.
importance as a total?
It's not, I would say, universally recognized by any means, but the data about the early adopters shows that there's a much higher level of commitment. I ask a question about senior management. I say, are they vocally supportive? Are they active visibly as role models? Are they driving forces? And it's a multiple choice. You can click one or two or three of those. Or are they not? Are they neutral or hostile? And the early adopters show quite a few who are vocally supportive. It's a high number. I can't remember it now. And then it goes down a bit when you ask, are they active role models? And it goes down a bit more when you say, are they a driving force? But the percentage must be around, I don't remember what, 20% or something who are a driving force in the early adopters. So yes, it's moving, I think, in the right direction.
So, and because your concept of the digital workplace includes all the work supporting tools. So it's not only social, it's also
no, goodness, no.
It's also a classical hierarchical information system.
Absolutely. In fact, I had a diagram I used that a lot of you know. I show the managed dimension, the structured collaboration through teamwork, and the social. For me, it's all part of that. And the mobile is like a new dimension now. And I think it should be extended to external things that the workforce does.
My question is in the direction, could you also analyze what is driving the higher importance on the management side? So are those the social parts of the digital workplace or the digital workplace?
I don't think they think in those terms. Okay. In my report, there are 23 case studies. Each one is at least 2 pages. And I'm seeing things where there are, I don't know, one example is a firm, Arup, engineering firm in London. And they tell a story about how the digital workplace enabled them to handle a problem that their client had when Hurricane Sandy took place, and how overnight they brought solutions to their customer because of the digital workplace. And I have other cases like that that are interesting. I think those anecdotes show that there's the top management needs to see a big why. And I think that's hard to prove in some cases. I think stories are better.
It's a question about ownership and governance. Has an owner of the digital workplace or owners in top management become more normal over the years?
You mean as an official title?
Yeah, or just that it's that there is a sponsor in top management or several sponsors if the digital workplace
if they have a program, there is. Otherwise, it's an initiative that will take place maybe with the person who used to own the internet and the people who own the SharePoint spaces and the people who are competing with each other. And sometimes there'll be a manager who will say, we've got to get together on this. Yeah. That's all very, very new.
But has that evolved? Has it become more normal?
Slowly.
To have a manager?
Not for the digital workplace as such. So that would be like a knowledge high-level knowledge person in an organization, because it's such an over-encompassing thing. If one person has that responsibility, it's very much leading a team of people who have responsibilities in different areas of that, I think.
Then maybe owners. I mean,
Owners,
they don't
yes.
have any owners at all. I know.
I see what you mean, yes. I think there are more owners and early adopters. I did not ask that question in that way this year.
Thank you again for
You're
the
welcome.
discussion on your results.
Thank you.